Good evening. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Here.
Councilmember Landman,
Here.
Councilmember DeBala,
Present.
Councilmember Schlegel,
Present.
Councilmember Gilbert,
Here.
Councilmember Honzak,
Present.
Councilmember Wesselek.
Here.
Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Tonight we have one work session this evening, and that is the Public Safety Task Force recommendations follow-up. In terms of upcoming meetings, on Wednesday, July the 16th, the City Council will have an administrative session that starts at 6:30 to discuss the city manager's evaluation. On Wednesday, July the 16th, the City Council will meet at its regular time of 7:30. We will have 3 work sessions that evening. The first is FY26 Budget Amendment number 1. The Public Safety Task Force recommendations follow-up second conversation, as well as board and committee appointment recommendations. On Wednesday, July the 23rd, the City Council will have a second administrative session to discuss the city manager's evaluation at 6:30. And on Wednesday, the 23rd, it's gonna be a big night. We'll start at a regular time of 7:30. We will have 2 presentations. The first is the Washington Adventist Hospital site fencing and demolition. The second will be the Piney Branch Elementary School feasibility study. For the Washington Adventist Hospital site fencing and demolition, we will be joined by Adventist Health. And for the Piney Branch Elementary School feasibility study, we will be joined by Montgomery County Public Schools or MCPS staff. We will have 2 voting items that evening. The first is a first reading ordinance approving FY26 Budget Amendment number 1. And the second is resolutions providing for appointments to boards and committees. We'll then have 2 work sessions that evening. The first is the Piney Branch Elementary School feasibility study preferred option. And the second is proposed resolution on Public Safety Task Force recommendations work plan. On Wednesday, July the 30th, the council will meet at its regular time of 7:30. We will begin with a presentation on the quarterly financial report for quarter 4. And then we will have a series of voting sessions. The first is a second reading ordinance approving FY26 Budget Amendment number 1. We are tentatively slated to have a resolution designating a preferred option for Piney Branch Elementary School. The next item is a resolution approving the Public Safety Task Force recommendations work plan, followed by a single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute a grant agreement with Let's Play America for Playday. The next item is a single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute an indefinite quantities contract for street and sidewalk work. And then last, but definitely not least, resolution providing for the city council's summer recess. And so if all goes well, we will be on recess until Wednesday, September the 3rd. And so with that, we are going to move to public comments. Given that we have no voting items this evening, do we have any public comments? And Ms. Musa gets 5 minutes.
So I don't really write these things down because I talk too fast. Thank you for the 5 minutes. I will start by saying I believe today is 641 days of the genocide in Gaza. We are at a point where U.S. contractors are on the ground picking off starving Palestinians trying to access aid alongside the IDF and treating it as sport. You can check the AP on that. Again, not me, not just my opinion. I can spoke, yeah, absolutely. And we also have Netanyahu here in town sitting with our president talking about how to both put Palestinians in concentration camps and ethnically cleanse Gaza. I'm here, though, to talk about policing today and some of my concerns about not just the way we are sort of going back and looking at recommendations that are now years old and out of date, but also the way that this council is considering the technology used going forward. And so there's a couple of things that occur to me. One is it is very hard to know exactly what technology we're using. What are the companies? What are the brands? I go digging through the police website and what are their, where their policies are. I go digging through Montgomery County, something else. I'm trying to triangulate. That is not the way this should be. It should be very clear. As a resident, I should be able to know. We have Axon, we have Flock, we have Leonardo Alsag, we have whatever. What are these companies? If you don't know, that concerns me, right? Because there's a lot of companies that are selling police technology. They all have different issues. But if I can't even find out where's the transparency, where are we as a community understanding what you all are voting on? I know, whatever it was, a week or two or a couple weeks ago, you voted on the bundling of Axon with Axon 4th-generation body cameras. And I saw at the bottom that there's no racial equity study needed. That to me says you don't fully understand the technology that you just okayed and understand the capabilities and what are we actually going to use and not use and where are the policies that say that. I had said before our policy on body cameras is way outdated. I know the chief had said he had gone and looked at the International Chiefs of Police recommendation. The last one I was able to find was from 2014, wildly out of date. Maybe there's a more recent one in the members only side. I don't know. But what I'm saying is whatever recommendations, it was out of date when we talked, was it 5 years ago or whenever it was the task force came together. At this point, it doesn't even begin to address the way the technology works, which means they have bidirectional communications. You have the ability to use translations, the ability to live stream, to draft police reports. And I saw somebody came here and spoke about all of that. I think they'd watched John Oliver, whatever, last week tonight. It was a great episode on Taser. But here's the thing. Like before, what did I just say? What was all of that? Are you guys sitting here going like, I don't understand what she's talking about, but you're voting on it. And it's critical you understand it because where is the data, right? When we have these Axon 4 body cameras, are we now matching that with Flock Safety for our license plate readers? Are we using Leonardo Alsag? Is our license plate reader data still going to our Fusion Center, which is accessed by federal authorities? Again, if you don't know the answers to these, you're failing us as citizens of Tacoma Park. And I know we just had ICE in town and you have policies that say we don't participate with ICE. Does your data participate with ICE? Do we have a way to know that? Do we have a way to audit our technology? Am I talking crazy? This is where like it needs more than the 5 minutes that I can get, by the mayor's grace or Jesse's grace or whoever it is, that gives it to me. But that's not enough time to really have these conversations the way they need to be had. And to the chief, I think you think I attack you. What I would say is we have deep expertise in this community. I have given my expertise to other city councils, state legislators, congressional folks, administration officials, even colleagues in Europe. And the chief last time stood up here made it sound like I was just one member just shooting my mouth off. And what is she talking about when I even quoted the chief's policies? We could be partnering and making this better and safer for everybody, and we're not doing it that way. And so I think you need to consider not just learning about the technologies, but also how are we being transparent about it? What do the police have? How are they using it? How are they auditing that use? How do we know if they're using it incorrectly or in ways that you did not account for? You actually have to decide how you want them using it first. And again, with the lack of communication on issues or what happens when things go wrong with the police and what doesn't get communicated, again, that gives me more concern and more pause. And so it's great to put out a statement saying we don't participate with ICE. It's not useful if your data goes to ICE, okay? Because that's how they know how to look for your residents. And there's a million ways that happens. And like I could stand up here for an hour and talk to you about it, but we're not going to do that tonight. So I guess what I'm trying to push you to do is rather than get up here and try to talk really fast and cram as much as I can in 5 minutes, that makes you go, I just heard a lot of things. I don't know what she said. Do a deep dive on that. Bring in the people who know. I'm not the only one. I'm not like special and unique. There are people who know who spend all their time doing this, right? And you have some right here in your community, and we can actually bring people in, via Zoom or something else. Like I'm happy to help pull that together. But if you want to do your job responsibly and care for your citizens, it's not just saying we have a policy, because that policy is meaningless if you don't know how it's backed up and if you don't know what it is that you're actually handing to the police, and if the police don't know how it is impacting the community or where that information is going. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comments this evening? Okay, seeing none in the room, our virtual public commenters.
We have two. We have Paul Hubner first, and then we have a second one as well.
Okay, great,
Susan Rogers, sorry.
wonderful. All right, we see you, Paul.
Can you see me and hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you very much. Paul Hubner, Ward 3. And I'm speaking for past city attorney Tom Gagliardo about issues he's addressed at the council before. And he says, once again, I object to your meeting in what you have deemed executive sessions and announced as scheduled to be held on July 9, 16, and 23 of 2025. The reasons are as previously stated. It appears that after 7 or so secret meetings without disclosing any information to the public, you, the mayor and council, have decided on the scope of the Cooper v. Tacoma Park audit and have or are close to selecting an outside law firm to conduct the audit. I cannot fathom why you think having made these decisions in secret is legally compelled and or to your advantage. But it is increasingly clear that you are undermining faith in your leadership and your stated commitment to a transparent process. Your furtive approach to this matter of public concern leaves the following questions still unanswered. 1, why was Mr. Black's employment continued for 2 years after he was found to have sexually harassed Kakila Cooper? And 2, why was the suit brought by Ms. Cooper settled for $1 million? And now I have proceeded this far in secrecy, I am compelled to ask, when the audit is completed, what will be shared with the community and what will continue to be kept secret? And that's the end of Tom's comments. I want to concur with Mr. Gagliardo. This entire secret process feels more and more and more like a cover-up. For students of history, we remember well that often the cover-up can be worse than the crime, although this was an egregious crime that reflects terribly on this council and the misleading city attorney and the Tacoma Park police and leadership. I also remind you of the loss of trust that this issue engenders and of the petition signed by over 200 residents requesting a full and transparent accounting that was signed and sent over a month ago. I thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you very much. And I just want to check that our next commenter.
I'm sorry, it doesn't look like Ms. Rogers is on the call.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, we're going to move on to council comments. Do we have any council comments this evening? Okay, Councilmember Gilbert.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to apologize to the members of the police department that were sworn in earlier today. I really wanted to be here for that. I welcome them. I look forward to meeting with each and every one of them individually and welcoming them. I remember how exciting a time that was for me many, many years ago, and the uncertainty and some of the fear, but the excitement. And so I look forward to meeting them, and I look forward to what they may be able to bring to the police department. But congratulations to those officers. Last week I talked a little bit about Tony Carey and his losing his wife. He was my opponent during the last election, and I wanted to update everyone on the funeral arrangements that are planned for Saturday, July 19th at 1 p.m. They would take place at the SGI USA Buddhist Center, which is located at 2900 Bellcrest Center Drive in Hyattsville, Maryland. That's right across the street from the Prince George's Mall. So again, anyone who knows Tony, reach out to him, show him some support. And if you can make it to that service, I'm sure he'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Okay, do I have any other council comments this evening? Councilmember Westwood.
Thank you. I just want to share again that I will be having an online town hall for Ward 6 residents next Tuesday. It will be online at 7:30. Looking forward to hearing what folks want to talk about. And in particular, I'm soliciting feedback on the Piney Branch Elementary School feasibility study. So if you want more details, please contact me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Councilmember Honzak?
Thank you. Excuse me. I just want to say also to the police department, I'm sorry that I couldn't be here to honor your newly sworn officers. Really excited to meet them. And I also want to say thank you to the chief and others for engaging with me and some other council members to start putting some pieces in place to continue a dialogue about public safety in places such as the Long Branch area and other particular sites where there have been some significant concerns about what's been going on. And I also am looking forward to, as are the neighbors, to the Coffee with a Cop at Coma Coffee on July 17th from 9 to 12 p.m. So I hope folks will really take advantage of that opportunity to come out and have a more informal dialogue with our department. I also want to acknowledge the ICE sightings today in our community, and I hope that people have looked online to see that the city has posted some information about that so that we make sure the information that's going out is accurate and reliable. And I want to say thank you for putting that into Spanish so quickly and making sure we could get that official copy out, just for the staff to know what happened today. When I put it out, initially the English copy was given to me, and there was a little delay, but not very much at all, by the city staff to get the Spanish version. So I appreciate you doing that in an expedited fashion. But it was the immediate knee-jerk reaction of the community to translate it for us. So, but we nipped that in the bud, and I wrote one-on-one to the very nice person who was trying to do the right thing, and I said, you know, we would appreciate if you would pull that back just in case there's anything. And she immediately deleted it, and we put out the official version. So I just thought it would be useful for everybody to hear how that went down, and just how important it is that we get that accurate information out straight from the source when we have it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Landman?
I just want to remind my constituents that there's an opportunity to talk on Saturday, the 12th, at a coffee with your council member from 10 to 12 at Spring Mill Bakery, and I hope to see some of you there. And I wanted to say a special thank you to the Independence Day Committee for a really fun and outstanding parade. This was the first time I got to ride in the parade for its full length and in many, many years. And it was great to see how many people were out celebrating, remembering why we had Independence Day. It was no kings back then, and it's a relevant sentiment these days, too. And I wanted to say a special thank you to the staff, and especially to our police department, who were there in force through the evening for the party as well, which was a really nice party with great music. And I just appreciated how joyful and peaceful it all was. And this evening, as I listened to the tornado warning, our police department managed to get an alert out in no time flat, and I appreciate the way that the police department, and especially Kathy Plevy, manages to get news out on something like that as quickly as they did. So anyway, kudos to the entire team for doing that. Thank you to the comments we got this evening. They were very timely regarding the task force. We're listening, and it was very timely to hear from you about the importance of us thinking about changes that are happening in the way data are used. Whatever our intentions may be, not everybody has the same intentions we do. The fact that ICE was here in our community today is just evidence of how important it is that we think about the intentions of everybody else who may gain access to those types of databases, and that we stay alert to changes, good and bad, that might be happening. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Landman. Councilmember Schlegel?
Thank you. I'd also like to extend my congratulations to our newly sworn-in police officers. And thank you for your commitment to serving Tacoma Park. I wanted to mention that a number of active, engaged Pinecrest residents came out to the VFW last night just to chat, just to build relationships, and to discuss some common themes in the neighborhood. And so we're hoping to put together a little working group to follow up on issues that they feel are chronic, having to do with code enforcement, traffic safety, drug use, safety at the playground, things that I appreciate all the attention that staff and the police department, as well as the Maryland Park and Planning, have given to these issues. And so we're all continuing to work and move forward optimistically on that. I also appreciate WACA residents who've been also working on traffic safety in their neighborhood. And to let my colleagues know, it appears that the WACA Association soon will be sending a letter to the DC Department of Transportation and copying at least the mayor and the city manager, asking for a study and to explore further traffic control measures at Walnut and Eastern, and they've been in conversation with neighbors on the other side of the line on that. Thank you to Ward 3 resident Rick Weiss, who for so many years has championed a gas-powered leaf blower ban, which went into effect on July 1st. And he gave me a lot of helpful information that will go out in kind of an educational update to residents on Saturday morning. Thank you also to Therese Gibson, who has been very helpful in providing background information through her role as a PTA area coordinator as we've been looking at the PBS issues. To the commenter about data and surveillance, I am open to, and I'm very interested in learning as much as possible about surveillance and data collection systems. I think it's very important, and I thank you for the invitation. And I've done a fair amount of research on my own, but I probably need more direction. And thanks finally to Paul Huebner and Tom Gagliardo for, again, raising the importance of transparency, the maximum possible, regarding this police department audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. Okay, seeing no other council comments this evening. I'm going to move into my comments. First, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge the fact that there was ICE activity in the city of Tacoma Park. Today, one of the challenges that I think all of us have is that we work as much as we can to try to build the relationships and partnerships across various levels of government so that we're able to not only share information in a timely way, but also try to make sure that we're verifying and validating information in a timely way. I do want to thank our staff, as Councilmember Honzak mentioned, who work diligently, but I want to make sure that everyone understands that in this city, we have developed relationships regarding immigration across all levels of government. We've been in communication with our federal legislators, Representative Raskin, Senator Van Hollen's office. We are in constant communication with Governor Moore's office. We are in constant communication with the county in terms of what they may be hearing as a way to make sure that we can, to the best of our ability within the authorities that we have, which I will admit are limited, to at least provide a little bit of comfort of being accurate information as quickly as we can possibly get out. So I do want to encourage everyone that if you do see if you do see something that you think maybe ICE activity in the city, to please let us know. We're working with other partners as well, but our goal is to make sure that the people who need the information consider us to be a reliable source so that they can take the necessary steps for themselves and their families. So again, I'm very troubled. It's been a busy day. But I want to really relay to members of our community that we are doing our due diligence to make sure that we're building the network of stakeholders so that when these things or when we become aware of these kinds of situations, we can work as quickly as we can to verify and gather facts and ultimately share resources if available. In terms of, I was mistaken in not acknowledging, because I know that this was brought up during the public comments, that the city council had an administrative function session today at 10 a.m. And that was again to continue interviews with possible firms for as it relates to the audit. I do want to express that members of council, we've tried our best to be as diligent as we can be to make sure that we're not having extensive conversations regarding the scope. So when we are having conversations with potential firms, just know that it is based on their qualifications and we're not going into or portraying that we have finalized a scope for this audit in any way. In terms of last week, I want to thank the 4th of July committee. It was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful 4th of July parade. It was not as hot as it normally is, which is great. And the go-go band later that evening was amazing. And, you know, I say all the time, there's a lot of things that we can't control with with what's happening in the world right now. But one thing that we can do is make sure that the bubble that is our community is a safe place where we are around like-minded people who share our values. And so it was nice to be reminded that we live in a community that is embracing and enjoys being with people who are from different walks of life. So that was wonderful. In terms of, I want to thank Ms. Musa for your feedback tonight. One of the things that this council has done in terms of data is definitely trying to work with our District 20 delegation to see if there's things that can happen in Annapolis that could also protect data. But also one of the reasons why we have just one agenda item for tonight is so that we can take some more time to really walk through the various recommendations from the Public Safety Task Force and to provide more concrete information regarding the steps that were taken. So I do thank you for coming out and definitely look forward to additional conversations around aspects of data. Particularly, I think it's going to be really important. I don't think that much of that bill aspects of the data sharing or data protections made it through Annapolis during the last session. And we tried. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a good point. And so these are some of the things that we can definitely have conversations about. And last but not least, on a positive note, was able to attend the Universal Circus with various mayors from the state, Black mayors from the state. And I just want to say thank you so much to the organizers. And if you have not had a chance to check out the Universal Circus, do so. It is great. I didn't know what to expect. I had never been before. And it was so wonderful. It was a load of fun. And I would encourage folks, it's at the National Harbor, and to check it out because it actually is a great way to be immersed in culture across the African diaspora, but also see some really, really, really talented artists that are doing some really great things. So with that, I will turn things over to our City Manager DeSpirito to provide City Manager comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, and to our guests. As Mayor Searcy alluded a moment ago, the city has issued a statement. I just want to reiterate, the public can find that on our website. It's also been put out on social media by the city. This was with respect to the activity today, earlier today, by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, federal agency, within our confines of our community. We can confirm that there was such activity, ICE activity, in the area of Carroll Avenue and Boyd Avenue during the morning hours today. Several individuals were taken into custody by ICE agents at that location. The City of Tacoma Park, however, reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the safety and rights of all members of our community, regardless of their background or place of birth. As a reminder, the City of Tacoma Park's municipal code states that while performing their duties, the city police cannot help with enforcing federal immigration laws that could lead to deportation. City employees, including police, cannot inquire about residents' citizenship or immigration status unless required by federal or state law, such as when someone is applying for a city job or a U.S. passport, for example. City workers cannot share information about a person's citizenship or immigration status with anyone unless required by law. And city workers cannot discriminate against anyone based on their citizenship or immigration status. So collectively, the mayor and council, staff, we understand that events like today's can cause fear and uncertainty in our community. However, the city is, we're seeking more details about what happened, and we will want to share more information in the future once we have it. In the meantime, we do encourage all residents to stay informed about your rights. On our website, we do have resources that you can access. There's various links there to what these resources are that can help provide critical information and assistance to folks to help understand what to do if approached by immigration enforcement and other scenarios. So I wanted to share that from the outset. From the police department, I think it was mentioned that on July 17th, they will have a coffee with a cop on, again, July 17th for casual chats, cool or hot coffee, and community connection. Whether you've got a question, a concern, or just want to say hello, the police are ready for that and would like to speak with you. It will be held at Coma Cafe, 8006 Flower Avenue from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Many of our residents will be taking summer vacations. Tacoma Park Police offer free vacant house checks to its residents while they are away. For more information and the application, please visit the Tacoma Park webpage and search vacant house. Tip: do not advertise your vacation plans on social media. We have more tips. Plan ahead. School will be back in session before you know it. Help us make the first day of school a happy one for every child. The police department will start collecting mid-July through August. Be on the lookout for the dates. Please do not drop off items now, but there will be a bin for donations for children in our police department lobby here at 7500 Maple Avenue. And so we thank you in advance for your generosity. And finally, from the city manager's office, I want to once again acknowledge our 4 new officers. I wanted to name them publicly. Earlier this evening, Mayor Searcy swore in 4 new officers. And these officers are Yanina Tikas, Jemiah Watford, Samuel Brownlee, and Alexa Lazama. So congratulations to all our new officers. And final shout out with respect to the parade, which my wife and I thoroughly enjoyed this weekend. I'd like to do a shout out to the Public Works employees that participated in the parade. They came with some of their special equipment with some information about how it's used and some demonstrations. I think they got some very well-deserved appreciation from the public along the way. I heard lots of clapping and shouts of thanks. But this is a group that is sometimes a little more invisible, a little more behind the scenes, or they're working really early in the morning or late at night, don't always get the recognition. But they're incredibly skilled, incredibly committed and dedicated to this community. I'd also like to acknowledge in that parade, we had our Youth Advisory Committee, mentored by Christine Heidebreck, who's an executive assistant in the city management office. Christine very selflessly devotes some time to this group, and they were there and enthusiastic, and we certainly encourage other young people to consider joining our Youth Advisory Committee in the future. So that concludes my report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, so now we're going to move to our main and only event this evening is the Public Safety Task Force recommendations follow-up. And for my colleagues, I just want to walk everyone through what the next few meetings that we're going to have on this topic are designed to do. So there were many recommendations, I would say like over 50 recommendations that were a part of the Public Safety Task Force report. And so one of the things that we want to make sure that we're able to do as a council is to make sure we understand the current state of staff implementation for each of the recommendations that are noted. The presentations will be centered tonight around those that staff feel are complete in terms of the recommendations. They feel that they've perhaps done enough. Future meetings will be more around those projects that are in, or those recommendations that are in progress, or those that may require the council to take some action, right? The goal is to ultimately get to our meeting on the 23rd to talk about a proposed resolution from the council that is designed to clearly communicate to staff and to ourselves what the next steps should be in terms of implementing or addressing the implementation of the remaining items in the report. Right? So there may be items that are listed that are strictly within the council's purview. The hope is to make sure that we have a resolution that solidifies the items that we're asking staff to continue to work on, the items that we as a council are committed to working on and working towards this year, and then how that ultimately, that enables me to better make sure that we're working these items into upcoming agendas so that they can be discussed. Okay, so again, we're going to have the meeting tonight, which will be focused more on the items that are completed, but on the 16th, we will have another presentation related to the recommendations. These will be more those that are in progress and those that may require some council action and discussion. The expectation is that we will start to discuss the draft resolution on July the 23rd with the hopes to vote on a work plan on the 30th. And again, the reason why I'm asking for us to work towards that work plan on the 30th, because that enables me to better be able to plan future agendas around the items that we ultimately agree to continue to work on. Are there any questions just in terms of the overview of the approach that we're taking over the next few weeks as it relates to the Public Safety Task Force recommendations? Okay. Hit your button.
So a few weeks ago, we talked about a resolution for 2017 that outlined goals for the police, for policing in the city. So I believe you're talking about a different animal here.
Correct. So that resolution would likely be an item that would be included in the work plan. but I think it's really important for everyone to have a clear understanding of the remaining recommendations in the event that there may be a need for us to incorporate certain aspects of open recommendations into the resolution that is ultimately passed.
And if there were items that have been brought up that we would want to add because they're new, or there's more information than there was 5 years ago or anything, that could be part of the work plan also.
It could be.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lamon?
So I'm looking at page 10 of this to just try and get a clarification on what category different things fall into. So this is about continuing efforts to have MOUs with the surrounding police departments. And so some of that is done and some of that is not done.
Correct.
Which one?
We'll talk through that as we get into the presentation.
Okay, so it'll be one or the other nights, but it'll,
Some will be addressed tonight.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so with that, I am going to turn things over to City Manager DeSpirito. That's going to kick us off with the updated PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, we want to express public appreciation once again to the members of the task force for all the work that they did in producing the original report, all the time and effort that went into that, and certainly a great deal of thoughtfulness that went into it. And we have the privilege of reviewing this after a number of years and ultimately wanting to convey at least staff's perspective of which items were completed and those that are still in progress or need further discussion or need further council direction. And we'll try to accomplish this over the course of the next, tonight and next week, as a prelude to Mayor and Council's desire to produce a resolution on policing. And that's scheduled for the 23rd, to remind the public. This presentation is posted on the city website, so I wanted to mention that for those that might be watching. This is, being the only primary item on tonight's agenda, yes, we can take some additional time to go through this, and we welcome that. I want to mention that I have a number of key staff members present this evening in person. Devin McNally, Director of HCD, is here. We have Ryan Kelly, who's our Director of Communications, and Chief Tony Duvall, who's with the Police Department, of course. And they're all here to assist with answering questions when we get to that point. Tonight, as the mayor indicated, what we really would recommend we focus on would be those items, the task force recommendations, those which are completed or substantially completed, and there are those that are continuing. So some of these tasks were completed, but the work goes on, and they kind of fall into a continuing category. Plus, those task force recommendations that staff does not particularly endorse are nevertheless presented here for Mayor and Council direction. We do intend to present and speak to those so that we can receive some further direction from Council that might be useful next week. Next week, we will present those items that are technically in progress, needs more discussion, and needs Mayor and Council direction. Since the last presentation, this one provides additional information and context. So while the format may look pretty familiar from the prior one, a close examination of the text will reveal that a lot of we made an attempt to include more of the original language from some of the task force recommendations themselves, as well as adding more information on the status of items and adding some categories that we didn't talk about as much last week or last time we presented, and that's next steps. So that's the focus, and that's what's new and different about this. I would very respectfully suggest that if it might be best to hold questions until the end, and then we'll be glad to go back. We have plenty of time this evening. I think in the interest of having some continuity and flow in the presentation, if it's your desire, I can go through all of it, and then we can circle back to any and everything that you wish to as a council. Okay. I think this was familiar from last time. And this I do want to, no, back to, there you go. I think it is important to reiterate the purpose of this endeavor. The Reimagining Public Safety Task Force was established by the Mayor and Council to provide recommendations that foster a safer, more livable City of Tacoma Park community for all residents, with an emphasis on addressing racial inequities or inequalities that exist in governments and services evolving around public safety. Okay, next. And I want to remind about the various themes around which the information is organized. We have community engagement and education is one of the themes. We have new and expanded programs. We have council external advocacy. We have policing policy. And finally, city organizational structure and training. So none of that was altered from our last conversation, but I thought it might be useful to just reinforce those are the categories around which the conversation will revolve. Okay. Starting with community engagement and education. Recommendations from the task force report are on the left column. When it says R number, that means that's literally the number of the recommendation, and that corresponds to the exact number in the report. In this case, the first one being recommendation number 9. Okay. In the center, we have a column with a P, and that's page number. And so that's also, we're hoping, is useful. We do have posted the original report, so folks can cross-reference these recommendations with both a page number in the original report, as well as what number each recommendation is. And to the right here, for example, we have notes, in essence, status, and additional information that we want to provide. In the first case, improve the structure and content of city and police department websites to foster accessibility to relevant information by community members. That was recommendation number 9. And number 10 was strengthen the existing methods of communication, email, alert, social media, neighborhood platforms, and so on, and explore new methods to reach residents with limited internet access, those that are non-digital, with other information access difficulties such as language barriers. So the note that we have to present to you is that the city implemented a new website in 2025. The new user-friendly website has more content and language interpretation. Staff continues to explore ways to strengthen communications and outreach via email, alerts, social media, neighborhood platforms, and so on. And we explore new methods to reach residents with limited access, such as non-digital and language barrier concerns. Next, recommendation number 11 was to publicize via the city website and social media any changes in funding for police in Tacoma Park's annual budget at least 30 days before the budget is voted on by the City Council. Our note is that the city incorporated 3 changes. 1, scheduling public hearings 30 days in advance of City Council votes on the budget. 2, implemented an interactive budget tool that allows residents to explore budget data in more detail year-round. And 3, we implemented a process of receiving and reviewing resident input. Recommendation number 12 was ensure that the city publishes on its website all code violations in apartments in Tacoma Park over the last calendar year. Our note is that information is available on the county website. Staff will provide, and we have a link in the presentation, staff will provide a link to the county's website where the information can be found. So that this is accessible information. Recommendation number 13, in recognition that the extensive public safety and policing data provided to the task force was of service to our work and to promote ongoing transparency, we recommend that data provided be made public. And this data is available, in fact, online, and we have a link to such. New and expanded programs. Recommendation 38, invest in an increased number of scholarships for after-school and weekend programs for children in Tacoma Park to address the true root causes of crime. Our note is that the city currently provides tiered scholarships, 20%, 50%, and 70% reductions. Full scholarships are granted to disadvantaged and underserved populations, and that is fully funded and has been for a number of years by the mayor and council through their budget. Recommendation 44, establish funding for Know Your Rights / street law training for all students enrolled in any school in Tacoma Park to know their rights when interacting with police, particularly as students may not be aware that they may refuse certain demands for information. Our note is that Montgomery County Public Schools provides access to training materials for Know Your Rights in the context of immigration enforcement and generally with interactions with the police. With advance request, the ACLU of Maryland also offers trainings on the same, and we're providing several links here to that information. Number 46, recommendation 46, create grants for Tacoma Park teachers to encourage attendance of teacher-specific trainings on topics such as cultural competency, implicit bias, mindfulness to combat the history of disproportionate application of discipline, and eagerness to classify students as having a learning disability / move students into special education and out of the general education classrooms, etc. Our note is that MCPS provides training to its staff on these and other topics as part of its professional development training. And we provided a link to what specifically that training is. Policing policies. Recommendation 18. The Tacoma Park Police Department shall use their discretion to end police traffic stops for low-level offenses. Our note is that existing policy and used as a model and lessons learned by the county. So we also have a link to that. So that's more extensive information than we can present here. So we have a link that we have explicit information about how policing is conducted in terms of traffic stops. Recommendation 20, create a poverty exemption fine reduction program for recipients of speed camera tickets. Our response is this is not possible due to current structure of speed camera citations. Specifically, tickets are issued to registered owners of the vehicle and not necessarily the operator at the time of a stop. So we are operating within the extent of law that we can do. Recommendation 22, the establishment of additional speed camera zones should be the subject of properly noticed public engagement and focused on areas with high rates of traffic accidents. The note is that city policy is restricted by state law in instituting fines and installing speed cameras. The mayor and council may wish to advocate to our legislative delegation, D20, to change the law. Recommendation 21, an officer may not search a vehicle or a residence unless they have appropriate probable cause or they obtain written, informed consent in a language with which the driver understands. Our note is that consistent with federal and state law, the Tacoma Park Police Department officers may only conduct a search for appropriate probable cause or must obtain written, informed consent in a language understood by the driver. And number 23, support community-oriented policing services, procedures, and partnerships. The note is that the police department has implemented numerous community policing activities as outlined in the 2025 annual police department report. We provided a link for the public for that. Continuing policing policies. Recommendation 24, the police department should continue practicing guardian policing. And to reinforce this, all officers should have annual de-escalation refreshers and training. Our comment is the mayor and council passed a resolution adopting guardian policing, and the police department is committed to practicing guardian policing per resolution 2017-45. All officers receive annual de-escalation training. In addition, conflict resolution training has been provided for a large number of our officers. And there's a link here to the details regarding the city's guardian policing program policies. Recommendation 26, update the police department's body-worn camera policy to ensure accountability and transparency. Our comment is the police department's body-worn camera general order was updated in 2022 to ensure best practices, accountability, and transparency. And we provide a link to that general order. Recommendation 28, continue efforts to create and/or strengthen mutual aid agreements. And our comment is there are existing memorandum of understandings, with MOUs, with Montgomery County and Park Police. The police department has re-engaged the DC Police in an attempt to develop an MOU with Prince George's County and other Maryland jurisdictions bordering DC. We consider, you can look at, frankly, at this item two different ways. One is that we've accomplished several substantial MOUs, but there are others that are possible. So, and there is some ongoing work with respect to that. Council may wish to move this to in progress or acknowledge the fact that since this policy, there were some MOUs that were produced. Continuing policing policies. Recommendation 30, the task force was unified in their agreement that emergent and rapidly changing policing technologies are an important issue deserving of additional study and public input. Our comment is that the police department updated mayor and council regarding technologies such as license plate readers, camera enforcement technology. Staff will bring any future technology enhancements to the mayor and council for input, and that will not necessarily be limited to the police department. AI is becoming increasingly prevalent in numerous disciplines and different services. And we, as a staff, will continue to explore the ramifications, the options, the potential, as well as things to be concerned about. And it's our intention to bring that information to the mayor and council and the public. Recommendation 31, majority of task force members recommend eliminating all funding for the current use of and the purchase of additional LPR technology. And likewise, a minority of the task force members recommended that the city council request information from the police department about how LPRs have been employed and the investigative value that they provide. Our comment is that the mayor and council voted to maintain the use of LPR technology per ordinance 2023-4, and there's a link to that ordinance. Recommendation 33, majority of the task force recommends eliminating all funding for the use of canines. And likewise, in recommendation 34, a minority of the task force supports future canine use for tracking and detection purposes only. The note is that the mayor and council discussed a canine unit at its April 25th, 2022 budget discussion. We provide a link to that, but did not approve funding for a police department canine unit. And the police department currently does not have a canine unit. Recommendation 37. Post reports online documenting investigations into resident complaints filed against police officers. Our note is that the police department complies with the requirements of the Maryland Police Accountability Act on posting of complaints filed against police officers. Disposition of all complaints filed are also listed in the Tacoma Park Police Department Internal Affairs Annual Report, which is publicly available, and we provide a link here to that report. Recommendation 43, the Tacoma Park City Council should pass a resolution reinforcing that Tacoma Park continues to support not having Montgomery County School Police Resource Officers, or SROs, in public schools located in Tacoma Park. Our comment here is that in early 2021, the Montgomery County Council and Executive decided to no longer fund school resource officers in Montgomery County Public Schools effective the fall of that year. There have not been school resource officers in the Montgomery County Public School system since. Recommendation number 45. Advocate to Montgomery County that school administrators and teachers receive training and increased training regarding the unequal distribution of discipline and lack of praise regarding students of color. And our note is that MCPS does provide this type of training, and we've provided a link to MCPS and what they do. Recommendation number 47, Tacoma Park shall request disaggregated data on public schools from MCPS, discipline, tardiness, suspensions, and use that to determine if community engagement suggestions are working or need to be adjusted. The comment is that MCPS data is available online, and we provide a link. However, the task force did not provide defined community engagement suggestions relating to schools in particular. So that might be something that could be further defined, but that wasn't part of the task force report. Recommendation number 49. The Tacoma Park Police Department does not currently participate in the federal 1033 program or other federal programs that transfer military equipment to civilian law enforcement agencies or otherwise purchase military equipment for use. The task force recommends that the department continue to follow this prohibition. Our note is that the police department does not participate in the federal 1033 program or any other program that transfers military equipment to civilian law enforcement agencies. Under the theme of city organizational structure and training, recommendation number 8, provide training and update protocols to ensure sensitivity, cultural competency, and fairness in official statements released by all city agencies. Our note is that training has been provided and staff regularly reviews policies and procedures for continued improvement. Recommendation 15, the Tacoma Park City Council shall ensure that the Police Employee Assistance Program has appropriate funding. And we note that the city offers this service through the Employee Assistance Program of our own, which is accessible to employees 24/7. So that is a service, a resource, and a benefit for our city employees. Recommendation number 35. Majority of the task force recommends reevaluating plans for funding for the construction of a new dispatch area and additional spaces for the Tacoma Park Police Department. Our note is that the Mayor and Council has approved funding for this project. In recommendation number 36, a minority of the task force recommends proceeding with the budgeted improvements given the subpar conditions of the current space. Mayor and Council has approved funding for this project, and bids are now being prepared by the Public Works Department. Recommendation 41, a majority of the task force members recommend the funding of recreation scholarships, that they should be accomplished through reallocation of any police department funding. And likewise, a minority of the task force members believe that determining the specific source of the funding is not of primary importance for these recommendations, and that they should be invested in from any available resources. And our note would be that city staff has used ARPA funds in recent years to fund recreational scholarships, and they are now funded 100% of qualified resident requests via the general fund, including the recently adopted budget FY26 that Mayor and Council approved in May. Okay. Now, moving on to, there's just a few screens left. These were some recommendations from the task force that staff is not particularly recommending or endorsing, but literally a next step would be, and it could be discussed tonight or next week, Mayor and Council direction to staff on these points. So recommendation number 2 from the task force was create a community assistance office and community safety team with the responsibilities that include responding to requests for mental health support in emergencies, neighborhood relations, addiction service referral, domestic violence relocation when appropriate, and referrals for social services, homelessness, etc. The status is that the Housing and Community Development Department currently has staff to address landlord-tenant services and housing code violations. So we do that now. Homelessness issues are addressed at the county level through the Department of Health and Human Services. All the municipalities refer homeless matters to the county's Health and Human Services Department for assistance through the coordinated entry system. The city coordinates with Bethesda Cares, which is part of the county's continuum of care. Next is recommendation 2.1. Establish a neighborhood services division that is separate from the police department for functions such as parking violations, speed camera monitoring, red light camera operation, crossing guards, and code enforcement and assistance. This division would be housed with the proposed Community Assistance Office. Our comment is that the code enforcement function was relocated previously to HCD, the Housing and Community Development Department, in the year 2022. Creating a division to handle the other functions would require additional full-time equivalents, i.e. employees, additional employees, and a significant increase in funding. State law requires speed camera monitoring programs to be overseen by sworn officers. So that's a state requirement. Can only be overseen by sworn officers. Parking enforcement and other automated enforcement programs require access to databases that are only accessible through the police department. Parking enforcement officers, who are civilian employees, require access to the police department's radio system to run vehicle tags and for safety purposes. Recommendation number 6, additional staff to the Housing and Community Development Department, including a social worker who can respond to housing conditions and safety issues, landlord-tenant issues, homelessness, crisis situations, and issues such as evictions or nonviolent disputes between neighbors. The status is that the Housing and Community Development Department currently has staff to address landlord-tenant services and housing code violations. Homelessness issues are addressed again at the county level through the Department of Health and Human Services. All of the municipalities refer homelessness matters to the county's Health and Human Services Department, who are staffed with specialists who have a great deal of capacity to deal with those issues. And recommendation number 7, victim witness coordinator position should be 2 roles versus a combined role as it is currently. Whereas it can make sense for a victim witness coordinator to be housed within the police department, a victim's advocate should be housed outside the department, possibly in the proposed new community assistance office. The status is there was an assumption by the task force that the victim witness coordinator provided both advocacy and coordination services. Whereas witness coordination has long been housed in the police department, continues to be, victim advocacy services are provided by the county. So adding the advocate component would be a duplication of services already provided by Montgomery County. And that is the end of our review of items that are completed, continuing, or those that staff does not recommend. At this point, staff would be very happy to answer any questions, go back over any of this material, and receive any direction from the mayor and council. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And yeah, it's a lot. I took a lot of notes. I have a lot of items that I just want a little bit of follow up on, and I'm happy to submit this later. There's just a couple of items where it was mentioned that there's work that is happening. Staff will, so for example, for item number 12 on slide 5, where we're talking about publishing code violations in apartments. And I know this has come up before. And we note here that we will provide a link to the county's website where the information can be found. I'm assuming that we're talking about providing that link on our website somewhere, correct? That's correct. And when will that happen?
I don't have the timing yet, but it should just be a link. It's just a link that we need to add.
Okay. So if we could just get confirmation of when that will happen, then that would make things a little easier in terms of completion or not. And then item number 44, that's on slide 7. Where we're talking about MCPS provides access to the materials for Know Your Rights training, the context of immigration enforcement, which I know we've spoken to all of the principals, and I know that they're doing a lot there, and generally interactions with the police. One question about, and I guess this is perhaps would be a question for council when we start deliberating. There's a lot of MCPS recommendations that, you know, MCPS has adopted some things and have modified some things. But there are some areas where I wonder whether or not it might be beneficial for us to do something within the city. Maybe not going through MCPS, but perhaps maybe working with the rec department to maybe have a youth focus, working with the ACLU to have a youth focused street law training, something that could be done within the city, wouldn't necessarily have to go through MCPS, but would provide, meet the spirit of the recommendation, which I know Your Rights in terms of immigration is really hot right now, but I think at the time of the report, this was more about making sure that youth of color understood how to interact with the police. And so I think that was really more about the street law training. And so I would be interested in knowing what capacity we may have to offer some sort of youth focus through the rec department, maybe once a year, street law training that kids within the city, not necessarily going through MCPS, but kids within the city would be able to sign up for.
Oh, go ahead. Should I?
I wanted to ask a point of clarification on this point. I had noted it as well. And maybe this is implied by your write-up, I don't know. Was there a change between the time of the task force report and now as to what MCPS is offering? Or are we just reporting on what they've been offering all along? Because I read this as the task force did not find what MCPS was offering at the time as being adequate, but maybe something changed between then and now, or maybe you know the answer to that, Madam Mayor, because maybe what you were implying is that there's a difference.
I don't know what it was years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it is my understanding, and I could be wrong, but at the same time that we were engaged in our public safety task force, there was public safety task force that were happening at the county level. There was just lots of discussions that were happening around police reform, police accountability, various trainings. And so even in some conversations I've had with some of our local principals, there's some trainings that have come to be now that, kind of stemmed during that time. So they were in fact new-ish. Now, keeping in mind, this was 2017, now it's 2025, like it's been a while. But so MCPS did do some things, like they got rid of the SROs. They started to require different types of trainings. They upgraded the different training types. I just wonder whether or not, because I know that MCPS has done a lot, I thought that the intent or the spirit of this recommendation was rooted more in making sure that our children were trained and knew what to do. And if it was through MCPS, awesome. If we can't get clarity in terms of what's happening at MCPS, then let's not just assume that we're trying to make MCPS do something. It could be that we offer some sort of course through our rec department. So I think that that's the spirit at the time in which this recommendation was being developed was one thing, but compared to where we are now, I think that there may be some things that we can do in the city to make sure our kids are trained. And Councilmember Honzek.
Yeah, just point of order related to this particular one as well. Because this is a little bit outdated at this point, rereading it, I can see that is probably the intent, but I think it's one of the only places in the recommendations where we're referencing know your rights in the current context that we're living in. Mm-hmm. And so I also, it brought to mind dialogues that we've been having with our public school leadership. I don't think that know your rights were being uniformly offered. I don't even think they were offered as recently as a few months ago, and some of the schools are finding it easier to do than others. And now I think that CASA has been really helping with that. But I think that one of the things that we could do in addition to what the mayor is suggesting that would go a little bit above and beyond what the original intention was, but in the spirit of this one is, I have heard a lot of concerns about youth being afraid, and our youth don't easily, as do our adults, don't easily know the difference between our uniformed officers and other, who is who, what are they wearing, what do their badges look like, and it could be as simple as us partnering with some of our partner agencies and doing like a YouTube video and putting that out there for people to see. This has come up at some of the public safety meetings that we've had, and again, I think that would get to the spirit of this and maybe be a easier thing to achieve than trying to have boots on the ground at every single school.
Okay, so I think this is one where we may want to flag as a council for additional discussion and follow-up. 44. Okay, and so there's a couple of items that are on slide 9 where this is the space where I feel like there's this D20 component, and there's some instances where they were successful, and then there's some instances where they were not. And I think this is a question more so for some of my council colleagues. I'm looking at you, Councilmember DeBala, because I know, for item 20, I believe Delegate Charkoudian was trying to do some things. I know she's been pushing to try to do some things around poverty exemptions in terms of tickets. And then for 22, in terms of the additional speed camera zones, we've had a little mini win with now having at least stop sign cameras. So I call it a very mini win. But I know that this is something that we've continuously pushed as part of our D20, not necessarily speed camera zones, but more around stop camera, red light cameras, those kinds of things. So I know for our working group, our subgroup beneficial folks, it would be helpful as we're going through these, if there are certain items, and Councilmember Landman, DeBala, and Wesselek, if there are certain items that we know that we've been kind of pushing or was responding to various bills that we may want to just keep at the forefront of our minds, because we're going to need to continue to advocate. I think staff are correct in that they've taken this as far as they can take it. And if we want to see some of these things move, we will have to do it at the state level. Councilmember DeBala.
I do have a question about the stop sign cameras. So on the stop sign cameras, the police department is looking at different locations. Is there a plan for public engagement in where they should be? Or is that also not allowed under current state law, the way, as you say, it's restricted under state law for speed cameras because they have to be based on the data? So
I'm turning you on now.
Sorry.
Thank you.
That's a really good question. I'll address two things.
yeah, I'd
while I'm
like
up
to
here.
know the answer. I mean, if you could find
Obviously,
out.
it is a fairly new, well, very new law,
Yep.
and it applies to only Tacoma Park and Baltimore City. What we've done thus far is we've done some testing to evaluate possible intersections where we could have cameras. But absolutely, as we move forward in this process, there's nothing that says that we can't have public engagement over intersections that they think are problematic. We already have received a lot of feedback about various intersections throughout the city. And a lot of those, when we did our pilot program in different areas, we put them in areas not only where we thought that there were problems, but also in areas that we received feedback from residents that they were having problems. So as we move forward to this, we're looking at various companies, but as we move forward, how we plan on engaging community members as well. There's nothing that restricts us from doing so. We feel very comfortable that there's going to be a plethora of stop sign intersections within the city that are going to warrant this type of automation.
Okay, great, thank
And
you
if I
for
could
that.
just touch on one thing on number 20 as you're looking back, and that's the poverty exception. The issue with that is not necessarily state law. The issue is more tied to how speed camera citations are issued.
Right.
They are issued to the owner of a vehicle or owners of a vehicle, unlike state citations that are issued to the individual. So if I stop you as a police officer and you're driving a vehicle, you get the citation. But it's very complicated to try to implement a poverty exception when you don't know who is operating the vehicle. So for example, I own 2 vehicles. My wife and I are registered on both of those vehicles. My son and daughter drive those vehicles. So who is driving the vehicle? So that's what made creating that poverty exception more difficult, not necessarily the state law, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go in order now because I don't want to take over, even though I have a lot of things circled. I think Councilmember Hanzak, you're next.
Chief, could I just follow up quickly with a question on the poverty reduction? It wasn't part of my plan, but since you were up there, haven't sat down, thank you. Is there, in your experience or knowledge, perhaps a way, though, to create a local level poverty exception that would, I mean, logistically, is there a way that it could be done for, let's say, the vehicle owning two-party, three-party, four-party household? Is that a logistical nightmare? Is it even within the realm of possibility as a locality?
I think trying to carve out that type of situation for the city, it would be very problematic considering what's established statewide. And it still goes back to trying to figure out who was operating the vehicle, trying to figure out their exact income level. It just becomes very problematic and very difficult to do. I will say, at both the state citation level and with speed cameras, if you go to court and you plead to the court that you have a poverty exception, a lot of times they will deal with you accordingly. So there are mechanisms in place if you are, if you just lost your job and you got the citation, you go to court, you say, I just lost my job. There's various ways. You might just pay court costs and not pay the fine. So there are other ways built in right now, not as necessarily defined as what we're trying to do. I think if you're ever going to try to create a poverty exception, it would have to be for state citations, because then you would be able to know exactly who the person was who received the citation, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, thank you. Let me see if my first question is not related to you. Wait, hold on, let me see what my second is before you sit down. First one, my second one. Actually, yeah, let me go ahead and jump to my second one then. So my second question is, I'm looking at recommendation number 37, which is marked as completed. I was just going to focus on the green ones tonight that were marked as completed. So it says post reports online documenting investigations into resident complaints filed against police officers. Can you comment a little bit more on that? I guess I'm not aware of where one could find those complaints. I've had a handful, very small handful of people who've reached out through me, and then I've communicated with you, and you said they can do it this way or that way. But I'm not aware of any place where I could go to find those written in any particular way, except at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, we provide that information in our internal affairs annual report, which specifies the number of complaints, the nature of the complaints, and the disposition of the complaints. There's a portal within the new Police Accountability Board, as well as the ACC, that has information about individual complaints that come into the city of Tacoma Park, and that can be found via the link that we sent. When they created the new Maryland Police Accountability Act, part of what they did, and I believe I sent previous information to the council, was created a Police Accountability Board and also an Administrative Charging Committee. So any complaints that come into the city, they can come in two ways. They can come in directly to the city, or they can come in through the Police Accountability Board, are all recorded on that site. So you could go in and see, for example, Tacoma Park received 2 complaints in August, for example. And all that's in the link that we provided. I think there's a link provided.
Okay, just so I can imagine this, and I'll need to take a closer look at it. So if for example, someone said they had a concern, is it absolutely going to go and they verbalize it to me? Then let's say they verbalize it to you. They don't want to write it down. I know I had at least one instance like that. Is that something that's going to go onto that portal, or is that more of a informal complaint unless they lodge it in some more formalized way?
I understand these are complaints, not complaints against process. They're complaints against police officers. So if you're complaining that I don't like the way that we enforce parking enforcement.
And I'm not talking about that. I'm
so
talking about
they're
officers.
specifically complaints against police officers. So any official complaint that is lodged will be, if it comes in through the police department, we are required to send it to the Police Accountability Board. And if it comes into the Police Accountability Board, they in turn send it to us, and then there's a process.
So in real time, if one of my constituents had a complaint and they contacted you and they did it verbally or in writing, they would in real time be able to find that right away in this, or is it something they would only see at the end of the year?
No, they would, so there's difference between regular residents that want to find out just the number of complaints and the nature of complaints than individuals that file complaints. Individuals that file complaints get much more information specifically on their complaint. So if they filed a complaint, they would be given a case number and a contact number, and then we would follow up with them directly. So they would get direct information not only from the PAB, but also from us. And when complaints are completed, they're investigated and adjudicated, they would get the result of that complaint.
And then for the public to be able to see that, they would see it at the end of the year?
They can see it if they look at the PAB regular monthly reports, and if you look at the PAB website, for Tacoma Park specifically, we are much more detailed in what we provide at end of year. It provides disposition, the number of complaints that we receive. So we just do a cumulative annual report, but the information can be found on a monthly basis if you go to the PAB website as well.
Is that something that we can provide a link to on our website?
It's-
Or
it's
is
all-
it
it's
on
all- it's
there
already on
clearly?
there.
Okay,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
just need to look, okay, thank you. It's
on
a little bit hard to understand. Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. And then my other one is not for you, Chief.
All right.
I just
Councilmember
have
Hansa,
two.
just to piggyback off of your question, because I did just pull up the report, and it sounds like, and I'm just going to read a couple sentences from the 2024 report. 13 complaints were recorded in 2024, 8 of which were subjected to internal investigations and 5 to administrative investigation reviews. Community members submitted 7 complaints, and 6 were submitted internally by an employee, the police chief, or a member of command staff. So it is it the case, and I just want to make sure I'm clear, that when a resident maybe submits when a resident submitted a complaint, that would be counted. So we had a total of 13, 7 came from the community, and then the other, and 6 came from internal complaints. Okay.
Yes, ma'am,
got
that's
it.
correct.
Okay. So my other one in the green section is related to communications, recommendation number 10. I don't know if our page 5. Sorry, those are the tiniest numbers ever. Page 5. So it indicates here that this one is completed. I guess perhaps because I'm a newer council member, I struggle to understand how that one is completed versus very, very, very much in progress. I know we've made a lot of progress, and I wasn't on the prior council prior to 3 years ago. And I know that also our newer communications director wasn't necessarily in this capacity before. So knowing all of that, is there anyone who would feel comfortable just giving me a few thoughts on what major progress we've made outside of the website that would make us put this in the green versus in the in progress?
So I think I can take a stab at answering that question. So I think in response to what the task force had, from my understanding, what the task force had put in the recommendation, the fact that it's in the green is in reference to the work that had been done on the website, which addressed a lot of the concerns about translation services and also a lot of the ADA concerns. As far as there's a lot of other additional work that needs to continue to be done. So I think, completed is partly correct, but there's still a lot of other stuff that's still in progress. So for example, I think, in the context now, of course, I wasn't here for when the task force was, was brought together and put together this recommendation list, but there's still a lot of work that's going to be done, beyond the website, especially more grassroots communications, and especially when we talk about community engagement. And so I think that's one of the big things that is still in progress. We have, of course, the Community Connectors program, which has been in the works for a while. And we're hoping recently we submitted an application for the National League of Cities Community Engagement Academy, where we're hoping that kind of serves the next steps to progress with our community engagement initiatives, where we can bring together some of these community organizations that will help us address some of these real legitimate concerns about, information divides and addressing some of those previously those groups of the community that were not as successful at reaching with our traditional communications methods. So that part is still in the works, but as far as this section goes, I believe that is mainly in reference to the work that has been done with the website.
I could also add that, when you've got a multitude of tasks and a bunch of really important ones were done, some of these are you're never going to be done. It's always going to be more and more and more. So this is really completed / continuing is really what the category is. And I at the very outset, I was mentioning that some of these are just things that you want to continue to evolve and improve annually, every couple of years. And so in some respects will never be totally completed. You'll always be working on them. So I compare that to in progress, which might mean that something really hasn't gotten initiated really yet at all, but we're working on it. I just have a distinction in my mind between that and something that's completed or continuing, where we have accomplishments, but we're continuing to implement more.
If I may just press on this one, and then I'll pass the mic. I guess I appreciating that an extraordinary amount of work and effort, and I'm very impressed with the website that has been completed and the multilingual aspect. I feel that the spirit of this particular item is definitively not met, I'm sorry to say. Just as a for example, because the one above it really focuses on the website, and that was, and it does have a multilingual feature, and I appreciate that. However, I think it's pretty fair to say that the vast majority of our non-English speakers are primarily not accessing our website, but are needing these other methods. And we do have the Community Connectors program, but that is not standalone either, and we still have yet to define what it is. So I would be very pleased if this would be moved to an in-progress item for further discussion, particularly since it's a council priority. And just to highlight a few things, I think that we haven't really successfully done micro-targeting in languages of any kind that I'm aware of, and frankly, a lot of that burden has fallen directly on me and my constituents right now, and I would really like further support. I mean, I'm getting it when I ask for it. Thank you today in particular, but I'd like that to be more systematic somehow. And again, I know that you've made a lot of progress on this with the website and multi-languages, and I just saw that the newsletter was digitized, so I know it's sometimes hard to move quickly, and I'm anxious to move fast like everything. Also, we had a billboard that we had put into the budget several years ago. They were ordered. They still haven't been placed. It's been almost 3 years, and I know there was some effort put into that. Like to see that move ahead. And then some other, another thing that hasn't, maybe I haven't been present for this, and it's not specifically mentioned, but I talked to someone from the working group on public safety. Robocalls, for example, were something that the public schools are using widely and very, very effectively. I don't know whether that was already discussed and dismissed, but it strikes me as one of the things that could be on this list very, very effectively. Anyway, thank you, and we don't have to further discuss that unless you'd like to. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think just one additional part too, and I don't want to say that we're resting on our laurels with what's been done on the website. There's still a lot of things that are, that a lot of potential with the new website as well. And we're actively looking into new ways to progress and utilize different features that are part of the Civic Plus platform that we had moved to that can also help contribute to addressing some of these concerns. Like you said, I mean, we don't know. We'd have to explore more into the SMS messaging, the text messaging directly. But these are things that are out there and things that we can explore and that we are actively looking forward to exploring in more detail.
Thank you.
Can I just add, I do want to point out that, I mean, we could have so many different categories for these. We were trying to provide general, but we also provide text in saying that we've done this, but we're continuing to explore these. So just because they're in the completed section doesn't mean that we wash our hands and walk away. A lot of these, they're ongoing. We're going to continue to implement what we say we will do here. And you are going to see a lot of these that, well, it's not fully complete. But again, it's not, if we were making widgets, for example, we've made the doors and we're done, but these are just on the continuum. So I just want you guys to keep that in mind.
I think, thank you for that. I think one of the things that would be really helpful, because keeping in mind that this is a government, we're always going to be, translating information and getting information out. But making sure that we're really clear on what the spirit of the recommendation was and identifying what is that key milestone that we think we could check the box. So if, like for item number 10, there was a lot of focus on non-digital, right? Limited internet access, language barriers. We saw when we were dealing with things like the MMPA, or, that we had to do a lot of flyers, door knocking, those kinds of things. We're moving towards the community navigator approach or the community connector. Is part of that effort going to include helping us with strengthening ways of communicating with those residents that are not going to seek first our website, right? And so I think that is understanding or knowing what that key milestone will be for us. Maybe it is, hey, once we get the Community Connectors program off the ground, and part of that contract includes on the ground, boots on the ground communication with people across various across various languages. And once we get that off the ground, check. I think that for some of these, it's a little hard to know what that key milestone, what is that key deliverable, what is that key thing that staff thinks is the major thing to be able to say that we've met, we feel like we've done enough to meet the spirit. Keeping in mind, this program could keep going for the next 10 years. It doesn't mean that this recommendation needs to stay on the books once we've hit that milestone, if that makes sense. Council member, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to read upside, I'm trying to go backwards with this way. Council member Slagle.
Am I on? Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that comment, Mayor Cersei. I had made a note, and this wasn't to be critical, but I had written done, period, and then done, question mark, because there's a sense in which it's reassuring that I see on a number of these green items, we did that. And then I think, well, to the spirit of the recommendation, how do we really know that, for example, just to take an example, if we know that employee assistance is available to members of the police force, for example, how do we know how many are taking advantage of that and whether it's helping people? It's a challenging question, but I think it's one, for example, when we are on slide 12, when we're thinking about the spirit of making sure that students are well prepared and knowledgeable and feeling safe in their schools and safe in our community, perhaps, and I say this to my colleagues, perhaps we should figure out how do we talk to students and say, how is it, how is it going? It's one thing to say that the trainings are being offered by MCPS, but how do we check back in different ways with different kinds of metrics, whether they're qualitative or quantitative? So that was just more of a thought than a question. The question that I had was a couple of questions about the traffic citations and violations. So this is on page, on slide 9. Two different things. The first question was about, and thank you, Chief Duvall, with recommendation 18 of the TPPD shall use their discretion to end police traffic stops for low-level offenses. I simply wanted to know whether stop sign running is considered a low-level offense under current practices. For example, if I know that there are situations where a patrol is assigned to monitor an intersection, but if police are simply patrolling I saw this happen in Laurel just the other day. It just happened that a Prince George's police car was coming down Rhode Island Avenue, and somebody went through a stop sign, and they immediately hit the lights and dealt with it. I wonder, it's not a gotcha question. I'm just trying to wonder, like, are we doing that or not?
Absolutely. So you look at what's going to cause a hazard in that particular instance. So just to give a little bit of history, when I first got here, there was a quota system, a point system for both citations and for arrests. Councilmember Gilbert probably remembers, on a monthly basis, you had to get a certain number of citations and certain number of arrests. What that caused officers to do is conduct meaningless traffic stops. They would sit at areas where we know we didn't have accidents and conduct traffic enforcement. Gotcha traffic enforcement, Maple Avenue. Many of you may have been stopped there. So to answer your question, absolutely, stop sign would fall under. That is a dangerous offense. If you're driving through a stop sign, you could cause an accident. What we discourage officers from doing is sitting at intersections where there have been no reported accidents, and you're sitting there on a fishing expedition. We don't want that. And you're getting people doing California stops. California stop is a roll. It's not a complete stop. So what we try to do when we allocate traffic enforcement is, number one, we don't want people pulling people over for meaningless traffic stops. So that would be, maybe a tag light out or something to that effect, or something, that doesn't have a nexus to traffic safety. What you'll see if you look through our data is you will see a drastic reduction in the overall number of traffic stops and arrests, for that matter, that were conducted by the City of Tacoma Park police officers. But you also see, you won't see an increase in traffic accidents. So, there's that thought, if we reduce traffic enforcement somehow, accidents are going to increase. That's not the case. So we don't have necessarily certain citations or offenses that you cannot stop people for. But what we do is we educate our staff on what we want them to do in regards to traffic enforcement. And I think when we did the data release, there was a drastic reduction in the number of traffic citations and the nature of which we were pulling people over for. And I just think it's just a common sense approach to how we go about doing that. We want to, when we're implementing traffic enforcement, we want to make sure that it's having an impact on traffic safety and pedestrian safety.
Thank you. Thanks. And on another angle, we recently became able to do the not only the stop sign cameras, but the traffic light cameras, red light cameras. And in recommendation 22, my sense of the spirit of this is properly noticed public engagement, speed camera zones, that there is an element of a concern for equity there. As we all know, like in the district, there's been a lot of talk about how they've used New York Avenue, they've used east of the river to get a lot of parking or traffic light violations. I wondered, what process did we follow in assessing what the equity impact would be of the traffic cameras, particularly at Tacoma Langley?
I will say this. So I'll speak specifically to red light cameras. When we began to assess locations within the city where we would place red light cameras, first and foremost, what we looked at is we looked at traffic accidents. So you'll find the vast majority of our traffic accidents are along New Hampshire Avenue. Yeah. So obviously we want to factor in equity when we are placing cameras in locations, but first and foremost has to be traffic safety. So when we looked at the cameras that we currently have installed, the majority of them are on New Hampshire Avenue, where we have the majority of accidents. The other ones are along Philadelphia Avenue at Piney Branch in Philadelphia. We have a few there, also where we had accidents. So that was the primary thing. But we also, when we evaluated sites and we did that evaluation, once again, the same thing we're doing with the stop sign automation, we listened to what we heard from residents. So for example, the intersection of Piney Branch in Philadelphia was evaluated not necessarily because of the number of accidents, but because of what we heard also from residents about near misses there, about they were crossing the street and they were almost hit, or they were concerned about, their kids walking home from the schools in that area. So to the best we can, we want to involve resident input. It's very hard with the equity aspect of it, because I can tell you right now, obviously Ward 6 has the highest, probably the highest number of minority residents, or a high number of minority residents, but it also is our main roadway and has the most accidents. And that's where we have to evaluate balancing out equity and balancing out safety. And, so that's, we're not putting them in certain areas for aha moments. That's not what we're doing.
Yeah, sure. I guess because the recommendation calls for a public engagement process, I mean, I understand the internal logic and the real risks for pedestrians, for example, between Holton Lane and Carroll Avenue around the corner. I just wondered, was there some sort of community engagement process other than public notification that the light cameras were going in, just so that people might be able to offer some feedback or input?
Well, I mean, I can tell you we've had many, many traffic specific meetings in Ward 6. And what we heard repeatedly was problems with those intersections, with everything from red light running to motorcycles to drag racing. Every time we have a meeting in Ward 6, we hear about that section of roadway. So we've engaged residents from traffic in general in Ward 6, and that's where we're hearing it. And also the same in Ward 1, when we had meetings in Ward 1, the complaints were, we're seeing, massive speeding. And we've done some other improvements along Philadelphia Avenue, reducing the speed limit and some other things that were done there. But to the best we can, and I think, it brings up a valid point as we move forward with these stop sign automation. Is there a way that we can, possibly have a community meeting or something? And we're open to that, to have residents come out and be able to say, hey, look, these are my observations. We can absolutely consider that, because we're not limited to that. So we're open to doing that. We can have further discussion on that.
Can I jump in since Ward 6 was brought up? Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Chief Duvall that in general, folks in Ward 6 want better safety measures in place. And as we were going through this, I was thinking about the equity, and I think that there's also this flip side of making sure that we're equitably keeping our residents safe, right? Not neglecting an area where there's a lot of racial minorities, but making sure that those parts of the city are safe as well. So I do think by and large, folks have been very, very vocal that they wanted these things, and happy to see any support they're given, so.
And I can say a large number of the violators on New Hampshire Avenue are not Tacoma Park residents. There are some, but that is an area that's traversed a lot.
That would be a concern for me if there were people who were living in Adelphi and we were essentially making money off them, not to improve safety for everybody. So it doesn't matter to me where they're from when they're paying this citation. May I just make one comment and not another question?
One comment, but your seat buddy is like, my light has been on.
My questions are sometimes brief, but then they lead to long answers. So I just wanted to point out that there's a nexus of recommendations around memoranda of understanding, referrals to social services, such as for people with homelessness or drug addiction. And I wanted to point out at the beginning of the evening, I mentioned my conversations with Pinecrest residents, and their feeling is that there is effectively a 3 jurisdictional hotspot around the district, Prince George's and Tacoma Park area, but that in the absence of those 2 key memoranda of understanding and maybe some coordinating system, it doesn't look as bad to any one jurisdiction as it actually is in accumulation. So I wanted to point that out and to just have colleagues think about, because many of us have border areas where we might be thinking about how our resolution could continue to just try to press for interjurisdictional cooperation and problem solving. Thank you.
Can I just address the MOU component of that? Where the MOU would only come into play in that particular area is jurisdiction within the District of Columbia. Our officers have jurisdiction as Maryland law enforcement officers in Prince George's County. And just to be candid, that doesn't stop us from sharing intelligence and coordinating enforcement efforts. We just recently had an enforcement effort along New Hampshire Avenue that combined the District of Columbia in their section, but also had Prince George's and our officers combined doing high visibility enforcement when we had the recent robberies and other incidents along there. So not having an MOU does not mean that we can't share information. MOUs are basically more geared towards resource sharing as opposed to intelligence sharing. We do that on a regular basis, not only with Prince George's County, but also with the District of Columbia. That doesn't limit that ability.
Thank you. And perhaps it's like on the social services side, that leg, maybe we can be exploring how to help with that too. Thank you.
Great. Next up, Councilmember Gilbert.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is connected to recommendations 33 and 34. I have my glasses, so I'm having problems reading, but yeah, I think 33 and 34.
I can relate.
Our K-9 program, I know I have enough, I think, background and historical perspective to understand why it was eliminated. But it seems that some members of the task force, a few at least, thought that we should reconsider it going forward. And that was, how long has it been since we've had K-9s now? And are we thinking about it internally at all going forward? Has there been an idea that we may have a need?
I can tell you, and people that were on the council, I am a huge proponent of K-9. I think they are very valuable if utilized correctly. And I say that with utilized correctly. There's a link to a discussion that we had in April of 2022 that was an in-depth conversation about all things K-9. And we talked about what a patrol dog does, what a drug dog does, what a search and rescue dog does, what a bomb dog does. So there are different benefits for different applications. So originally we had 3 K-9s, as you know, in the city of Tacoma Park when I first got here. All of those were cross-trained as patrol dogs and CDS drug dogs. You know, we phased out, we thought that was too many, we had 2. So I think it's 2022 when we had our last K-9. So I think there are absolute benefits in having K-9. I think we would be very valuable to have a drug dog. We have a huge influx of various drugs that really could benefit from having a drug dog. Now understand, when we're talking about K-9s traditionally, drug dogs don't do apprehension work. They wouldn't do, for example, if we had a bailout from a carjacking, that would be a patrol dog that would go out and understand the ultimate goal is not to bite an individual. It is to apprehend and find out where they are. If we need, I have a subject matter expert on the back in K-9. Captain Evans was in K-9 for 17 years as an officer, sergeant, and lieutenant. So if there are any specific questions about that, I could defer to him. But I do think there are absolute benefits of having K-9. I do think it's critically important. And one of the reasons that we got K-9 in the city of Tacoma Park is to have control over K-9. Many of you who have been in the city for a while remember the horrific incident that happened in 1993. I think about our early 90s, I'm not sure if it was 93, with the Prince George's County Police and an incident in Langley Park that resulted in the Prince George's County officer going to federal prison. We felt that we wanted to control the policies and procedures. To be candid, we had a pretty horrific incident that occurred in 2018, and that led to the decision not to fund our unit. But I think it would be valuable to have a conversation. So this is in the completed category. I think there would be a benefit, in my opinion, to move it into the further discussion and have this council to hear again. And I, like I say, I encourage the council, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, to go back to the link that's here on the discussion. Only 2 members of council were on the council at the time, and see what the arguments were at the time. We can absolutely update you on what the different disciplines are. There's everything from a comfort dog to the patrol dog, but I think there are definite benefits. We still use K-9 in the city of Tacoma Park. We don't have our own, but if we have a carjacking and you're a victim of a carjacking, we're going to call another agency to come down and conduct K-9 operations. That delays the operation because we don't currently have K-9 in the city. And we don't control their policies, where if they were here in the city, we would control their policies. So I think there is a benefit. I think it's a discussion not for tonight, but for another night. So I think my views on this are well known to the mayor and Councilmember DeBala. I don't need to rehash them, but I think I'm open to a further conversation if the council would like to do that.
Okay. I think what most of us would want to know going forward, if we're going to have the discussion, is, how urgent a need it is, how often we've been calling out the county. Those numbers would be beneficial.
We definitely can provide those as background. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Councilmember Landman.
For the record, Councilmember Gilbert definitely has a pro-dog bias, I have observed myself. Pro-dog, I'm not going to say about working dog, but just pro-dog.
We put his dog to work for sure.
Actually, I was going to ask you about the canine issue myself, but I had a very different question. And I had observed that there were these two different comments from the task force. And I remember very well those discussions, although I was in the audience at the time, about the use of canines. And I think that the task force had a very different perspective from your own. And I think the residents in our city, some of them come from cultures where canines have a very different gestalt, if you will. And so there was a lot of heat behind that discussion. And I'm going to comment that it's a statement against interest, but the officer that I rode with on my ride along indicated to me that having a canine team actually is a very good recruitment tool for police departments. That was news to me. But my question is whether, based on the comments in the recommendations, do we currently have a written policy on the types of things that we can and cannot use canines for?
We absolutely do. We
okay.
still maintain that policy. Absolutely.
Okay. I'd love to, if you don't mind, just know where that is so I can look at it to inform myself.
I can share it with the council, but it also can be found on our website. I'd be more than happy to share it with the
Is it
council.
in the orders? Is that where?
Yeah, it should be.
Okay.
It's a general order. It should be on the website, but I'd be more than happy to share it with council.
Okay, I'd like to read it because I think it would be helpful in thinking about, what we would use them for today versus what if we had a full-on canine corps of our own. Then I had one other question having to do with the various, in the spirit of what the task force recommended, which was in a way to take as many things off the list of things that we do through police that could be done through civilian means, like, for example, the mental health clinicians and other things that they recommended move into the neighborhood services category, such as what we did with the, enforcement of, trash and that kind of thing. And it says in recommendation 2.1, this is in the list of staff does not recommend that you touched on at the very end, city manager, which is on page 19, 2.1, and then P number 22, where it says parking enforcement officers who are civilians require access to the radio system to run vehicle tags and for safety purposes. And that's sort of presented as a rationale for why they should remain in the police department, I think. I mean, that's why it's in that column. And I guess my question is, well, we do have civilian personnel who use radios. I mean, the dispatchers are civilian personnel. I'm not clear on why that would be a rationale for why parking enforcement would need to be in the police department, because it doesn't seem like it would be dispositive of why they couldn't be civilians or be part of the HCD. I wonder if either you or the city manager could comment on that.
I absolutely can. So it's not just that. There's also access to databases to run vehicle tags that are through the police department, not through HCD. So as they're out and about, they also need to run vehicle tags and do various other components. I will tell you, we have seen absolute hostility towards our parking enforcement agencies or our parking enforcement officers, and it's paramount that they have access to immediate police response. And being on our radio system affords that. There are multiple different reasons. I think that it is a component that involves dealing with the public in a way that is an enforcement capacity. And as I said, people get more angry about getting a parking citation than they do about being arrested. So yeah, our parking enforcement officers have been, very hostily engaged. And there are other parts of these recommendations, like moving speed enforcement to another component, which is right now, per state law, has to be overseen by a sworn component. The citations need to be signed off. So I think there are ways, and I think we have worked towards trying to divert calls for service. The perfect example is our pilot program for mental health counselors. We are trying to diverse, and mental health calls are a very, very large percentage of calls we get, substance abuse, mental health. So we're trying to divert as many of those calls as possible to a civilian-only response where police do not need to respond. So we're hopeful that when the pilot is done, we will be able to develop a protocol for calls being diverted so police officers do not have to respond.
We're gonna talk about that one next week, right? The mental health one is not on the list for today. Yeah, okay. So is it typical then for a police department to always be the home for parking enforcement?
Yes.
Thank you.
I didn't catch that. What did
To
you?
be the home for.
Oh,
is
to be
it-
the home.
Yes, and I just want to remind colleagues, I believe, and folks can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that this issue came up for MML as part of one of their legislative priorities because there are a number of very small communities that don't have a large force. And one of the things that they were trying to push through Annapolis is to allow for non-sworn officers to be able to do parking enforcement. And I don't believe that it passed.
It wasn't parking enforcement, it was reading the camera gear that they wanted to have non-sworn officers.
Right.
Yeah, it was related. It was related to the review of the cameras.
The camera reading.
Right now, non-sworn can do parking enforcement. It was specifically as Councilmember
About the
Lander
cameras,
related.
thank you.
Point of order, may I just ask another question about that? There's a technology that I just tripped on, and pardon my total ignorance, but it was new to me, where you put these posts, and I forget what they're called. You put these posts as a city in the ground, and they, in places where parking enforcement is very important, let's say near an intersection where you just have repeat offenses near maybe a restaurant or something, and it blocks buses from turning. Are you familiar with that technology? And is that something that's allowed by law, that let's say it had, I don't know if it has a camera or not. Just comment.
To be honest, I'm not familiar with the
Okay.
technology.
It
you're
sounded
referring
pretty
to.
cool, I have to
Yeah,
say.
it does.
Yeah.
We are always looking at advanced technology. As everyone knows, I'm a huge proponent of technology as a force multiplier, so we don't have to be places like the stop sign automation, red light camera automation, speed camera automation. So if there's something that you see, any council member that you see, some technology that you would say, hey, this might be good for the police department, we absolutely can see, number one, if it's lawful to do so in the state of Maryland. Number two, if it is, then we can test and evaluate it. So we're definitely open to technologies that can reduce our need to have, whether it be parking enforcement officers, police officers, or anyone go out and do their job. So if you have that link, please send it to me, and we'll take a look at it.
And I just want to make sure that, just in terms of trying to think through the status for this particular 2.1. So sworn officers would be needed for speed camera monitoring, red light camera review?
Not for red light camera, but currently the way we're structured is for FTE purposes, our speed camera folks and our folks that are going to do the stop sign automation, which also has to be approved by sworn officers, I believe, are now taking over that red light camera stuff as well. Okay. So all of those are kind of combined into one. We have a civilian that oversees it. We also have officers that approve the citations, so it's kind of combined as one. So if you move one component over, it kind of complicates things because there are 3 FTEs that essentially are in that unit. If that makes
So
any
there's
sense.
one unit that includes civilian and
Correct.
sworn, and they are making sure they're meeting the requirements by covering all of these items.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councilmember DeBala?
Thank you. Many of my questions have already been asked. I have,
I don't think you're on. I can't hear you.
I'm on, I'm
You're on?
just short.
Okay, just kidding. Oh, sorry.
Let's try that again. They try so hard to put it close to me. So I guess just at this point, a couple of comments. And so we have talked about on page 5, number 10, about the new methods to reach residents. And I think for further council discussion, spinning out the part that has to do with non-digital, non-tech, non-website methods, and having that be something that we do more than just say we're working on it, would be something I'd like to talk about. So understanding that we are working on it and making progress, but maybe that's something that this council wants more attention on. So that's just flagging that for a potential action item for the council.
So are you all asking to move it?
I'm suggesting that we do that, but I don't know I don't know when we decide that. I just want to get it on the list.
Yep. So I think it's important for us to start keeping a working list of the items that the council has decided, or you're getting some inclination now that it would likely need to be moved to an in progress. So in this case, for 9 and 10, it looks like the website component may have been addressed in terms of Rec 9, but Rec 10, in terms of, methods to reach residents with limited internet access, non-digital, with other information access or with other information access difficulties, that's an item that should be moved to the in progress.
And in the same vein, yes, that it's technically complete, but I did appreciate the discussion on item 44, page 7, the street law and know your rights training. I liked the idea of exploring with the rec department whether there was something more we can do than what the council had, what the task force had originally suggested. So that's another potential council talking item. Same thing on number 20 on page 9. A little more thinking about whether there are ways to do a poverty exemption, knowing that all of what the chief said about the structure of speed camera citations is true, but maybe I want to think about that one a little more also. I had already mentioned 22, the public engagement, so we'll skip that because it sounds like we're planning to do that already. I did want to come to one that hasn't been discussed by the council, but was raised earlier today in public comment. Number 26 on body-worn camera policy and number 30 on changing technologies. And even though the task force was just a few years ago, things are changing so fast and we are adopting technology so rapidly that, and I'm a fan of doing it, as you know, I keep voting for it. But would it be something that the council would like to have us look at the implications of it? What does it mean that we have brought on all this technology so fast? What are the interactions?
I don't think we brought any new technology, just for clarification, other than the red light cameras. And the stop signs that are gonna come
Well,
on.
it's 2 right there.
We've had LPRs and we've had body worn cameras for quite some time. So I don't know that they're new necessarily. I will say that any new technology we're gonna bring before you for review. When we did the new red light, we had an extensive conversation about what red lights were, what they composed of, where we were going to put them, how they work, what they could see. And when we had the LPR conversation as well, we went in depth. I think we had somebody from MCAT come in and talk about where the data went, how it was stored, how it was shared, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So
and
I don't anticipate.
I do remember, especially the LPR one. and that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Do they interact? How do they interact? What happens with the data? I think that is something that I would like the council to say to ourselves, is that something we want more on? Nothing about doing any of the technologies right now, just for our understanding and in case there's some policies that we need to be thinking about in terms of privacy that weren't even an issue 6 months ago.
It may be helpful, if it's helpful to the council, for me to provide,
Well,
or
I'm just
staff,
asking the question.
or staff to provide kind of an overview of the technology we have. So in other words, we have LPRs. Here's a link to the session we had on whatever date it was. Here's
that
our
was
conversation.
really good
Here's where it currently goes, and maybe that's helpful. And then if it raises questions, then we could have a follow-up session. I'm more than willing to do that. I just would need to know what technology specifically you all would want that background information. I'm assuming LPRs specifically. I'm not sure what other technologies we're going to be bringing some information about stop signs forward. It's the same, pretty much same technology, speed cameras and red light cameras, but be more than happy to provide
So I'm
that.
just putting this on the list as something that the council might want to, when we get as far as what more steps we might want to take.
I would second your idea, not only the technologies, but the success of the walling off of our data sources from outside. Having been exposed to Doge in the last few months, and the ability of some of those hackers to access data sources that were intended to be private or intended to be walled off from others, it makes us more aware of the potentiality. You know that, Madam Mayor, better than the rest of us.
Yeah, I think, so I see that there's a couple of mics that have come up. I think that for me, one of the things that I think is really important is not looking at each individual technology, but really taking a look at our policies overall in terms of how are we securing the data, what are requirements regarding sharing, how are we, like, who has access, how do these systems interact with one another? I know that one thing that came up when we were renewing the LPR contract was the point about AI and how now these systems have all of these new add-ons, whether you want them or not, they're baking them in. I mean, quite frankly, I feel like my laptop is recording everything I say every minute of the day, because the minute you accept Copilot, you are opening up Pandora's box. So I think it's important for us to start thinking now, and it's a challenge that all municipalities, all local governments are having to face, is how all of these technological advances behind, in the background, that's running in the background, may create some challenges for us in terms of that openness, in terms of the data, and how it can be viewed by others, either on the back end, unbeknownst to us, in terms of whoever our technology vendor is, and then also who we allow to have access on the front end. So I think that there is a need for us to start having these conversations. And quite frankly, I'm not exactly sure if it's the best approach is to have the conversations when it's time to renew a contract, right? Like, how do we have these conversations in a more proactive way so that when we're having the conversations with our technology vendors, we can specifically explain to them what it is that we're looking for?
I agree. I think an example of that occurring was the LPRs. That was not in a renewal of a contract. That was just, we were bringing forward that LPR technology specifically in regards to the task force recommendations. And that's why we had that work session to discuss what our LPRs, what they did, how many we had, who got the information, and so on and so forth. I do think that as we're doing that, there's other things outside the police department that we may want to look at as well, not just the police department. That's just.
No, totally agree. Totally agree. I think that this is, you all have a subset, have information, a lot of information, but I think that there are other components within the city that also have a lot of information that may be capturing different information. And so overall, how are we making sure that we are protecting the data that we have to ensure, quite frankly, I think right now data is the biggest commodity And so folks are trying to figure out ways to capitalize off of data every day. And if we're not proactively thinking about what data we have, what assets we have, and how to protect them, we could find ourselves in a situation where, unbeknownst to us, we're subjecting our residents to challenges.
Can I finish?
I think Councilmember
Just,
Honzak
just
had a follow-up.
quickly, thank you for this conversation. I think it's extremely important, and I appreciate Ms. Musa for coming forward today and bringing this forward very prominently. I agree with the approach of approaching this when we're not doing contracts, and I think it might be a conversation in which we potentially invite some experts in just to talk to us about the context, which is moving extremely rapidly, about personal privacy of our residents versus public safety for any given, and what can a locality do that's within the realm of reason? Because as we all know, things are moving so quickly that even as professionals and as private citizens, it's very, very difficult to figure out if you're being monitored yourself. So we certainly, and there's a lot of things that we aren't easily able to control. So I think that would be a really helpful, taking a step back and looking at weighing those two things and then focusing in on, therefore, the technologies, and then kind of taking them one by one and thinking through them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak.
So it turns out I have covered everything I wanted to bring up.
Okay.
So thank you
All right, no worries.
for allowing me to take a look.
I actually have a couple more, if that's okay. Item number 8 on page 14. And the update for this one, training has been provided and staff regularly reviews policies and procedures for continued improvement. Can folks describe what that is? It's slide 14, item number 8, around provide training and update protocols to ensure sensitivity, cultural competency, and fairness in official statements released by city agencies.
Yes. So another one where I am not specifically aware of the training that was provided. Much of what I have encountered since I started here I feel like we have a pretty good grasp of the different, how are we being sensitive and how are we incorporating some of these things that we know are important in the different communications that we are sharing. From what I was told, there were trainings that were provided before I started with our previous communications director, and those have been then instilled in the way that we do things and the procedures we follow currently. As far as trainings, I am always open to partaking in particular or specific trainings that would help address these different concerns. But I do feel pretty confident in the ability, I feel very confident in the ability of our staff, and I think you see it in the way that we communicate things. And I believe also that as we continue to reach more directly those different groups of the population that we are, that are historically missed, underserved populations, then those are things that we will start to take in as we receive feedback on the different communications that we're putting out there. So it's another thing that, again, it says completed, but I also would potentially consider it in progress in the work that we are continuously doing as a department.
Okay. So for this one, I believe the task force made the recommendations because there were concerns regarding how we were describing some of the updates that went out regarding cases in progress and how individuals were referred and whether or not we were including information regarding race in some of the wording. And I would actually say that we should maybe, if folks can follow up, so that we can really get a better understanding next week in terms of whether or not this is something that needs to move in terms of in progress, because I know that there were changes that were made. I just want to make sure that I understand what trainings were happening, what protocols are in place, and how are we making sure that we are continuously training our staff so they're aware when they have to write these things in such a rapid way?
So you mentioned this came about from a specific incident. The incident was the shooting that involved a Pentagon police officer who shot and killed 2 individuals at the Overlook on New Hampshire Avenue. And it was the police department's initial press release that referred to 2 of the victims in the shooting and the initial press release in the confines of their activities at the beginning of the incident as suspects. So this incident started with 3 individuals breaking into cars, and our press release, you referred to them as suspects in that context. 3 suspects were breaking into vehicles. Every reference to those individuals after that were as victims. But so moving forward, the police department just uses generic terms, individuals, and that's what we decided to do. So there's no there's no issue with that. The task force and others took offense that we referred to 2 of the victims in our early press release in the relation to their activities prior to being killed by that Pentagon police officer. So we revised it and we just use generic terms. I just want to be clear. Our police department does not release the race of individuals. We never did that unless, so I just want to be clear, unless it has a relative component to the case. If the lookout specifically needs to mention race, we do not release mugshots. We don't, of arrested folks. We don't do that. Other jurisdictions do that. We are very sensitive about putting out information that is not needed. If the race of an individual is not needed, we do not put it out. But if the suspect was, a 6'3" white male with a blue shirt and green shorts, his race is relevant. So yeah, I think that we understood the impact it had on members of our community, and I think that looking back, that was just what we did, but then we have to we look back on the impact of others. So we're trying to evaluate that. And since then, we haven't had any releases from the police department that weren't generic in nature. And it's just, it serves the same purpose to give the message. It just doesn't have specifically suspect, or unless it specifically is 4 suspects broke into a vehicle, and you kind of get.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and thank you for that, because that was a while ago.
Yeah.
But I think that the spirit of the recommendation was one of recognizing that was the perhaps the impetus, but the spirit of the recommendations were around making sure that we have processes and training mechanisms in place. And while we may have changed, from the police department perspective, I think that there were also just concerns about how we were issuing communications more broadly. How are the clearances happening? Who's ultimately looking over these things? What kind of trainings do they have? It wasn't necessarily limited to, if I remember correctly, the police department. It was about how we are releasing things more generally, in addition to what may be released from the police department, but other communications, and how do we make sure that they're culturally sensitive, appropriate, and that the people who are handling those requests are properly trained and have the right protocols in place.
You're spot on. And I think that there were trainings that were conducted within the police department that we can provide that information. I think that's what you were asking for earlier. And I know Ryan is new, but Donna Wright was heavily involved in providing training and providing that review protocol. In other words, so if we're putting out a press release with a significant thing at a city level, what is the review process for that? And I don't know if Ryan can memorialize and figure that out, but we definitely can try to memorialize the training aspect of what was done with staff from that, based on that recommendation.
Thank you. And again, I don't want to put folks on the spot, but if we can get that, because we're going to be talking about this for the next couple of nights. But if we can get a little bit more intel about what the trainings and the protocols are, I think that would be really helpful. And I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a follow-up on that.
Yeah, I did have.
Councilmember Hanzai.
Yeah, thank you for that. I had no recollection of the spirit of that one in relation to what you are describing. I interpreted it from reading the report as well as a procedural one, but also interestingly, it's interesting that we're going straight to communications. My mind went straight to the deeper level of HR policies and cultural competency. So I know that is something that our city is eager to address. I just want to flag that. To me, that it definitely goes beyond language, right? So this is something that I would hope would be part and parcel of our HR orientations, reorientations each year. And I know that this issue is going to arise on a much broader level than just the police department as we look forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Westwood?
Thank you. I have a bunch and I'm trying to weed through because some of it has already been raised. One thing I want to flag, page 9 of the PowerPoint, just noting there's the numbers for 20 and 21 are should be swapped to match the July 2021 report. So just FYI. So if anyone else is trying to compare the two, they won't be confused. I think I might just focus on 26 with the body worn camera policy. And I just pulled it up, but I haven't quite read through it. So the updating the body worn camera policy was recommendation marked as completed that in 2022 it was updated. I wonder if 3 years is enough to take another look at that.
It's due for review. If you look at all of our general orders, they have review dates. All of our operational general orders get reviews annually. They're going to get a comprehensive review. I think that one might be August of this year. If there should be on the top of it, there should be an expected review date on that.
On the top of what?
If you're looking at the general order, at the top of the general order, there's a date in which it was issued. There's a date in which it may have been revised, and there also is a recommended or a date that it's going to be reviewed again. And I'm not sure without having the general order in front of me, but there should be a date on that for the next review for the body worn camera policy.
Well, the link here brings you to the 2022 one that has the review date of October in 2022, effective date October 2015. I don't know about that, but
That's
so
definitely
I
a
guess
typo.
we started the cameras in 2015, and you're saying that this policy has been annually?
No. We started the cameras way before 2015. I can't remember. It was well before I got here. We've had body worn cameras, I think, since 2008, 7. I can't even recall. It's been quite a while. So operational policies, we review on a consistent basis. So what used to happen is when we review general orders, the date of issuance would remain on the general order. So it looked like we never reviewed a policy. So what we did is we added a section for when we reviewed the policy. If there were no changes to the policy, it would just show as a review date. If there were changes made to the policy, a new date would be put on the policy, and that would be the issuance of the policy. I'd have to go back and look. I wish I could pull it up, but I can circle back with you. But there should be a revision date that will show that we're going to review that, and I believe it's August of this year. I may be wrong, but just because it says August of 22, our general orders doesn't mean that they haven't been reviewed since then.
Okay, so that is on a list of, it is an annual review of that policy.
What we do is we do a much more comprehensive review, and I think that might be on a 2 or 3 year cycle. I'm not sure which. We do a much more comprehensive deep dive than just looking at the policy. For example, that policy is going to probably be updated because of an interim order that we put out a couple months ago. So that policy is going to what we added to that, and I think that interim policy, that interim I can't remember what they're called, interim general order, I can't remember what they're called, will be put into the general order, and then that general order will change. It will have a revision date of whenever date we check that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Councilmember Zabala, is it related
Yes.
to this matter?
It is. Yeah, only to say that I mentioned this also as something I wanted to see more than just your standard review of the policy. So I'm going to just add it to my list of possible things that the council might want to look for follow-up on.
Okay.
Yeah, I,
Thank
mean,
you.
I definitely can pull up that general order and tell you what the expected review date. If it's not soon, we're more than willing to do that. We need to add that interim order to it anyway. So.
Yeah. Okay. And similar to that, I made a note for item 30, which we've already discussed a lot about the emergent technologies, both and others. It's just how can we ensure that there's continued study and public input. And for the technology, there's software updates, there's the databases, there's a lot of things that can change all the time. So how can we make sure we're staying on top of that? Let me just see. Recommendation number 2, which is on slide 18, which is in the, red. I just, in looking at the original report, the task force recommended a lot more. So I just think that warrants a little more discussion, that the task force really was looking for a much bigger change amongst the staff than what is listed here, which is good. So I just want to make sure that we are covering our bases.
Can you repeat the page?
Oh, I'm
that you're
sorry.
on?
It's recommendation 2 on slide 18. Page 18. Let me see.
Can I just add that, yes, this item, it has like half page worth of information.
Yeah.
So we were trying to be as succinct as we can and get to the main topic, which is why we provided the page number of the original document so that folks can go in that document and
Yeah.
see what it says.
Yeah, thank you. And lastly, I wanted to actually give Chief Duvall an opportunity to talk about a program that Councilmember Lamb and I learned about in the Police Academy about the vouchers that are given to folks if they're pulled over for, say, a missing taillight, that kind of thing, because I think that speaks to some of this, some of the poverty exemptions and whatnot.
Yeah, so the voucher system is a way that when we pull somebody for it's not a citation, it's equipment repair order, where they're required to fix a deficiency on their vehicle. We give them a voucher that they can use towards paying for fixing the equipment. We wish we had more people that we were able to give these out to, but it's a good program for people that, so you may not have money, you might have a taillight out, but you don't have enough money, you're living day to day, you don't have money to fix your taillight, or you don't have enough money to fix your headlight. So it's a way in which we can provide some monetary support to people that get pulled over and need that support.
I just want to make sure. So Councilmember Hanzak, is this related to this topic?
Yes.
Okay,
It's very
go ahead.
quick. Can you just clarify, do you give those to everyone that gets pulled over for an equipment replacement, or how do you judge?
I believe it is offered to all of everyone that's pulled over for equipment repair order. I believe so. I can clarify that.
I just want to say, I would hope so, unless there's a clear criteria
no,
on
we
why
don't
how
look
you
at you
would
and
try
say,
to figure that out.
You
Okay.
look like you're wearing raggedy clothes, or you're driving a junky
Right,
car,
yes.
a hoopty, and we're getting no. It's
Yeah.
I'm almost positive it's given out to
That's
anyone
very
that-
cool. That's very cool. Yep. Thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you. Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you. I've just been sitting and listening, and there seem to be a couple of broad themes for our continued work with this. And one of those is areas where, as I said earlier, there has, in a sense, a box has been checked, but it could be that there's a circling back that's always going to be needed. I would say that my concern would particularly arises when we see things where trainings have been done. And as an educator, I know that if you don't do the training again and again and again, year after year after year, you're suddenly going to realize that you reached a point where things had slipped and the culture you had intended to have isn't there. So I think that that's important for us to take a look at. And then the other piece is, and similarly with technology that's changing, things that are changing. We need to keep checking back. Another piece is I'm detecting and reflecting that there's a broad thread running through many of these recommendations about just making sure people are doing well, people are okay, not experiencing fear, anxiety, stress. And I think that the underlying spirit of the Community Assistance Office was trying to get to that. And so I thank Councilmember Westlake for suggesting that it warrants more discussion. I also wanted to return to the recommendation about the, it was worded as the Employee Assistance Program. It's recommendation 15 on it's on slide 14. It says that the City Council shall ensure the Police Employee Assistance Program has appropriate funding. I feel like it's not enough that we've met this unless we have some kind of measure. Are the people who would benefit from this knowing that they can benefit from it and feeling comfortable availing themselves of it? And I know the chief a few months back talked about his pride in establishing a culture where mental health and caring for one's own mental health was normalized. But I would just want to say I think we should really work back to make sure that that's happening.
I think City Manager DeSpirito has something to say about that, because I do recall measures being developed when we received a performance measure presentation from the consultants. And I distinctly remember that there was something related to uptake of the Employee Assistance Program as one of the measures, but defer to you, City Manager DeSpirito.
Thank you. And I really sincerely understand and appreciate where you're coming from on that. I think it's a desire that these are programs that are genuinely services available to employees that are genuinely useful and meaningful to them. I think we all share that interest and concern. Beyond that, it is a completely confidential process. I'm not going to say, willing to explore that some more. I think that there's a lot of elements around that we cannot collect data about, particularly the efficacy of the program unless it is voluntarily provided. And there's always opportunities to ask for voluntary feedback. I don't believe it could be mandatory. It almost gets into some of the HIPAA type of stuff. But I just want to say I understand where you're coming from, and we're willing to look at that. I'm not entirely sure how deep we can go with it ultimately because of the extremely confidential nature. I know some cities don't even collect data on the utilization of the program, like how many employees and from what departments utilized it, because that would be considered information that could be misused. So, but we'll look into that though.
Yeah, and I will need to go back and take a look at the report, but I do believe that the performance measurement presentation might have alluded to an indicator just regarding the general number of staff kind of thing.
Or
And that might be the most you
The
can
most
do
you'll be
is
able to do,
How many
right.
how many employees
we're
engaged in
simply
it this year
documenting
versus last?
this was the presentation was made again this year about the availability of this program, something like that.
Yeah, and staff certainly appreciates that each and every year and the public needs to know, and the employees need to know that council's historically fully funded that service for employees.
Councilmember Landman?
I just wanted to make one quick follow-up comment about all the talk about the revisiting the technology on a regular basis, that it's really not something that is limited to police department, although that is highly sensitive data. So is the HR data that we're talking about now. And I wanted to suggest that we consider this something that we would want to see done hand in hand with Z Abbas, who's actually certified in this area of security of the IT systems, because you know, some of the most sensitive data that we've been reading about that has been accessed is financial data, personnel data, and not just police data, and have it be a holistic thing that's undertaken and not simply something that in the context of the task force, but overall for the city. Thanks.
Yep. Councilmember Hanzak.
Thank you. I just want to come back since there were a few council members that referred to the red section that I know we're going to just dive into next week. But since you flagged sort of the mental health issues in your last comment there, I want to make a comment because I had a number of scratches along the red zone, and I think the theme that I see there is I know talk about this often, but I wasn't on that, but I read the report. It is a theme of the community needing more support that's coming from a wider range of holistic, comprehensive, cross departmental services of some sort. And I can say, I know I say this a lot, but I can say that I as a council member, I have felt like I'm trying to do a lot of these things and fill in gaps. And we've filled a few of them. Like I know that we've now got some folks, although I'm not entirely always clear, who are responding to eviction issues or, most recently we had the AC outage. But what I'm getting at is I find that there's sort of this missing piece of everything from anxiety and growing mental health, which is really, really growing extraordinarily across our community, as I observe, from the pandemic through now with a different array of issues that are affecting people to, the real dire need for a comprehensive approach to these kinds of issues and giving I don't know if it's giving residents or council members or different people the ability to lean on the city to figure out how to navigate. I feel like that's we're just not quite there yet. And I see that theme throughout several of the things that say, staff does not recommend because you've got particular pieces that the city does. And I understand that we have to focus, but I think that, there might still be a gap that I'd like us to maybe think about talking about next time, across the different departments. What are those gaps across these different, pieces of this chart that are not filled? And I welcome any council members reaching out to me and discussing. Thank you.
And I think, yes, Director McNally, I think this is your area. This is your moment. You've not been sitting here for hours for nothing. You have your time at the mic.
Yeah. So I think a lot of these gaps represent what I'll say national failures in adequately funding these services and state and counties' attempts to provide some level of services with the understanding that they're now working with even less funding and increasing demand. So one of the goals, particularly when it comes to mental health or any services that really go outside of direct housing assistance, and by that I mean like landlord-tenant work or eviction prevention, and our role in that is really as a funding source, is to get them in the hands of Montgomery County DHHS. So their center up on Silver Spring is the closest one. Unfortunately, it's a 9-to-5 center. The 24-hour center is up in Rockville. And that's because all funding for various different human services flows into that particular agency. So that's all the state funding around aging and disability, that's funding around WIC, SNAP, like all these things flow into that particular agency. And they never have enough funding, they never have enough caseworkers, but they are the ones who get the federal funding and the state funding. So if we were to create our own office, we would likely either be coordinating with the county to get funding for that, but more than likely we would be footing the bill for that if we were to try to address those particular needs. And so a lot of the resources my department develops are multilingual kind of packets, and we're working on getting additional packets. I know we've put together trifolds for you guys, but to get them as quickly as possible to those resources that do exist.
Thank you. We could talk more. I think part of it is going to be, at least for me, as we dive a little deeper, because I think that this also relates to perhaps some of the other recommendations that are in progress around what are we doing in terms of the community navigator and what does that look like? What are some things that maybe even the council may need to do in terms of advocacy to have more resources and support services that are locations down county? I mean, Rockville is a hall. So if it is the case that, hey, we may not be the right folks because we're not a social service provider, but it may make sense for us to say, hey, if the council is really committed to making sure that there's more easily accessible access to these types of resources that are available closer to the city, then maybe that's the advocacy point that we need to make with Montgomery County. But we could talk deeper into this, because I think that there's more recommendations that may also relate to that in progress sections of the document. Okay. So with that, and you all thought we weren't going to be here the whole time with one work session. So with that, I'm not seeing any additional lights. I just want to thank all of the staff for coming out tonight and walking us through this work. And I know we've been asking a lot of questions, but I recognize the amount of work that has already gone into addressing the recommendations, and appreciate all of the work that everyone has been doing. And so with that, we will continue this conversation next week. And everyone have a great night.